Hello everyone, my name is Evgenia Lisitsina. I'm very happy to welcome you to my channel, and today we have another dose of inspiration and motivation and everything else you expect from me. Specifically, I want to discuss with you the myths about creative professions. This is actually a very interesting topic because there are so many things floating around creative professions. Let's put it that way. For example, when I wanted to change my profession from a government employee to an illustrator, I heard all sorts of things and had all kinds of ideas drilled into my head. So let's sort them out, because many of them actually distort the real picture of what an illustrator actually does, what you really need to prepare for when you're thinking about becoming an illustrator, and what challenges, so to speak, await you on this path. Here, in fact, I've gathered not only the negative, so to speak, myths that paint the creative profession in a dark light, but also the positive ones, which again slightly distort the picture. And the main statement here is, make your hobby your profession, and you'll never work a single minute in your life. That's all nonsense, my friends. I don't get it. As a rule, those who turn their hobby into their profession end up losing their hobby, their outlet, and their way to relax. I've experienced this myself, and many of my acquaintances have faced the same thing. So what happens? Here's what happens. Of course, you start out working with a lot of motivation because you enjoy what you do. You might even do it for free, but at some point you realize you no longer want to do it for free. And then you start getting fed up with how much you're actually working, and you begin to systematically burn out. You start to dislike what you once really loved, and this leads to a situation that borders on depressive states. And the most frustrating part is that at this moment you realize that while you were building this creative career, I'm speaking specifically about myself here, guys, really. While I was building this creative career, I forgot to come up with another hobby for myself. Can you imagine? And even now, when I'm tired, when I want to do something, when I need to relax, unwind, find some new passion, there just isn't any new passion. That's it. And I still love to draw. I adore drawing. But when I'm burned out, I can't even make myself just doodle something in a sketchbook because I'm so exhausted that even the simple action brings up a ton of negativity in me. So, my friends, a hobby is just a hobby. I'm not saying no, by no means should you avoid it. If you love to draw and want to make it your profession, go ahead, there's no problem with that. I'm saying no, on the contrary, of course it will be a big motivation that you enjoy the process itself, you like what you end up with, right? And even at this stage when you're not getting paid much for it, everyone starting out goes through this, you'll still get satisfaction from the results you achieve. That satisfaction can last for an hour, 2, 3, or even longer. Again, beginners and really illustrators in general will understand me. When you've just finished a piece, you look at it and think, oh my God, this is a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. You come back an hour later and think, oh my God, how could I have drawn this mess, this disaster? It's bad, really bad. It doesn't matter, and so on. There you go. So my friends, it's not a bad idea to turn your hobby into your profession. But it's a bad idea to think that means you won't have to work anymore. It's just like any other job where there are sometimes difficult periods when you don't enjoy the work, it doesn't bring satisfaction, and you need to know how to take a break from it. Which you rarely allow yourself to do because it seems like everything should come easily, everything should be done by inspiration, in the flow, and so on. But no, friends, creative work, as I've already said, is just like any other job. It requires a lot of effort, a lot of perseverance. You have to analyze, you have to automate processes, and so on. So essentially, it's the same kind of production as well. Relatively speaking, like say the production of socks, right? That is, your work also has a cost price, even if you're not using any actual materials. There is still the cost of your working hour. There's the cost of the gadgets you use, right? There are other expenses, there are opportunities to cut costs and increase added value. Right now, I'm basically giving you a university level economics course. Well, No, my friends, this is a normal, pragmatic approach to any kind of employment. So if you have this kind of understanding, if there's minimal romanticizing of the field you're involved in, then you get, so to speak, the maximum useful output from it. But if you have your head in the clouds, if you think that creativity is about some kind of sacred, I don't know, sacrifice or something like that, then you just can't have a proper production process. That's why hobbies are wonderful, creativity is wonderful. But if we're talking about turning this into a real career, a real profession, you need to approach it more pragmatically. The next myth that often haunts people who grew up in the 90s or earlier, of course, nowadays the younger generation doesn't believe in any of these stories at all. So this is the story that creative people are poor, that artists are starving, and so on and so forth. In today's reality, this idea doesn't hold up at all. Absolutely not. Because I've said this a million times and I'll say it a million more. The visual art market is growing, and even though artificial intelligence is spreading more and more, there still aren't that many skilled professionals. Yes, competition is increasing in a way. Yes, we now have artificial intelligence and it might seem like anyone can just type something in, get a cool picture and so on. But no, friends, that's also a big myth. By the way, here's another myth about creative professions, that artificial intelligence will replace all of us. No, it won't. The same thing could be said about the time when Photoshop suddenly appeared and there was panic that everything was over, that nobody would need traditional drawing anymore, and that we'd all be out of work and so on. In fact, there have been 1,000,001 such crises in visual culture, so to speak. And this isn't the first, and I'm sure it won't be the last. So my friends, regarding this, I can only say one thing. First of all, I have a separate video about what I think on this topic. And secondly, you need to understand that yes, the system is changing and the market as a whole is changing. But, by the way, it's very interesting that despite the fact that Photoshop once appeared and the field of CG art emerged, artists who draw by hand didn't disappear. In fact, they even benefited from it because the value of traditional hand-drawn art increased. And the same thing is happening now with the arrival of artificial intelligence. By the way, pay attention to the trends in my video about trends. I mentioned that trends are changing, and as the market for all these AI-generated artworks is growing, despite AI's attempts to copy the styles of other artists, which I actually strongly disapprove of, I support Hayao Miyazaki's take that it's disgusting and shouldn't be this way. So despite all that, hand-drawn art is actually coming back into trend. And have you seen the prices for wall murals lately? Where do all our millionaires live anyway? So going back to the point is, artists these days are definitely not starving people at all. Someone who knows how to use a graphic editor and understands the basics of drawing can definitely make money from it, even if they're not a top professional. For example, artificial intelligence still can't create good vector graphics. So if you want to make money with illustration but don't know where to start and you feel like all the niches are taken over by AI, come join my vector drawing courses. When it comes to vector graphics, people are still unmatched. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So please feel free to check out the website. There are basic courses there, as well as workshops that will help you draw in even more interesting and fun ways. There's another myth that I often see among beginners. This is the opposite of what we talked about earlier. It's the idea of, I'll make millions. Unfortunately, guys, as much as I'd like to say, yes, really come into illustration, there's just tons of money here and so on, that it's easy money just flowing in, that as soon as I think about it, I immediately get an order for 500 billion and so on. By the way, this is often promoted by people who sell their own courses. I'm not one of those people. I'll be honest with you right away. This is hard work. Work that requires constant development because it's a rapidly and actively evolving field since the market is growing. And if the market is growing, it demands a large supply, right? So it's only natural that we've seen the emergence of artificial intelligence, right? So my friends, what can I say? No, unfortunately, you won't make millions here. Yes, the salary will be good. Yes, you can earn including more than, for example, the average salary in your region, partly because people who work in illustration, design and graphics have the opportunity to work remotely, including for foreign markets. And this also gives you the opportunity to take on higher paying projects. But no one will get those projects for you. No one will come and learn how to work with color for you. No one else will be the one crying over Adobe Illustrator. By the way, it's not even necessary to cry over Adobe Illustrator just to learn how to work with vectors. No one, it's only you, it's only your responsibility, and so on. So it's only up to you to build your career, and only you can figure out where it's more profitable to work, who it's more profitable to work with, and so on. There's another myth I come across very often, that if I start freelancing, it'll be a dream job. I won't depend on anyone. I'll be this totally free artist doing only what I want. And basically, that's the whole story. That's just not true at all. Absolutely not. And again, these kinds of claims are often used by people who sell their courses, those who sell their courses dishonestly and tell all sorts of tall tales just to get you to buy the course by making you believe in this dream, right? It's much easier to sell a dream. It's much easier to sell some kind of idealized future than real skills. Unfortunately, that's just how our emotions work. That's how our brain works. It feels like if I buy this course, I'll instantly get that future and I won't have to do anything to achieve it. That's exactly how, in fact, marketing strategies are often built for educational courses. So guys, be very careful with your critical thinking. If you see that in some, let's say, USP, right? In a unique selling proposition, they're giving you an emotion instead of specifics, then most of the time it's just not worth it. So look at the programming, pay attention to who is selling it, because it's critical thinking that will help you avoid this kind of disappointment. Because freelancing isn't a perfect job. Freelancing is a job where you work really hard, you get really stressed out, especially during busy seasons. For example, New Year's is always a super stressful season when all freelancers are scrambling. And then, for instance, summer comes, or say the May holidays, when everyone keeps saying, let's do it after the holidays, let's do it after the holidays. So today there's a lot of work and tomorrow there's none. That's basically the fate of a freelancer until they build up a solid, stable client base. That doesn't happen in the first or even the second year, which means you really have to work hard, work yourself to the bone. By the way, I also have a separate video about how I worked as a freelancer for a very long and active period. And in that video, you can actually see the real picture of what freelancing is like. Just don't believe it. Don't believe it when you see those pictures of a beautiful girl lying on a lounge chair with an iPad, drawing something, and the caption says, while I was just lying here, I drew something incredible in 10 minutes and got paid $1 million for it. And then it's some kind of messy, non-commercial portraits, you know, the kind people used to love drawing in Procreate for a while. And like, I got paid, I don't know, 300,000 rubles for this. No, that's Allah. I'm not saying it never happens. But if such a case did happen, it's exactly the story of that one and only survivor. In other words, it's a fluke. It's not like a regular thing. A regular thing is, what is it most often on freelance? Stickers, packaging, branding, characters. And these come with a clear brief, very tight deadlines, and honestly, not that high of a payment. That's it. So especially if you're just starting out, the pay isn't very high. So be prepared for the fact that freelancing, especially at the beginning, isn't that idealized picture you might imagine. There's another myth, a negative one that my students often bring up as well. It's the idea that only super professionals are needed on the market right now. If I don't know everything about everything, if I can't draw in every style in the world, if I haven't studied at an art school, college, or conservatory well, I know they don't actually teach art disciplines at a conservatory. That was a joke. So, my friends, this is actually a myth. Let me explain why. The market is very large, and in particular, the vector illustration market is huge. And this market doesn't always require top-level skills. Let me give you a simple example. Who often comes to me? People who need, say, even something like a sticker pack, right? they're not willing to pay a lot of money. It's some small startup that just needs some kind of visual design. They have, let's say, 5 or 10,000 rubles for this, and that's it. That's how it is. They don't want to use AI because they don't understand how it works. Or they specifically need, for example, high quality vector graphics, especially if we're talking about animated stickers. So they're looking for someone. So my friends, when it comes to animated stickers, from the illustration side, that is from the perspective of an illustrator or character designer, you don't need any extraordinary knowledge. Yes, you need some basic character design knowledge, and you need to know about color. You need to understand how to draw in vector, right? You need to understand the technical requirements for illustrations intended for animation. All of these, by the way, can be found online. So that's why most of these orders that I get through social media, I usually just pass on to my students because they don't require such a high level of expertise. I'm no longer interested in taking on these one-off small orders. So yeah, I just don't have any interest in that. I have no motivation for it at all. But for beginners, there are tons of such orders. The same goes for book illustration. As cool and amazing as it might sound, most of the time publishers like Phoenix that work with commercial illustration don't actually need some super top tier artist. Of course, they pretend that yes, they want this amazing artist with their own unique vision, but in reality, they don't need that. They just want commercial illustration and they want it cheap. Yes, because unfortunately, they don't pay much, but it's a great experience. And again, it's great for your portfolio and so on. So you don't need any incredible knowledge for this. Someone who has taken a couple of courses can easily handle this kind of work. So my friends, please don't put things off until the last minute. Don't think that you need to study, I don't know, like 1,000,000 hours of illustration before you can enter the market. You need to enter the market here and now. Just take what you have right now and use that to build your portfolio. Post your work on Behance, on illustrators.ru, and on social networks. So basically actively promote yourself and everything will work out for you. There will be a client who is fine with you being a beginner, who has a budget for a beginner. You'll find each other in this world of solitude and everything will be good and wonderful. And by the way, there's also a myth about promotion. By the way, there are actually 2 opposing opinions or myths that are equally common in the illustration community. The first myth is that as soon as I post my work, 1,000,000 clients will immediately come running and urgently buy my work or commission something from me. And the other myth is that nobody needs my work at all. I draw so well, so why do these upstarts get the orders? Why them and not me? Huh? And there's this real sense of disappointment, right? Let me explain what the problem is. The problem is that now, yes, there are a lot of illustrators, just like there have always been a lot of artists, really. A lot of people have always drawn. It's actually a pretty common skill among humans. So who comes out on top? It would seem that the one who draws the best should win, but in reality, the winner has always been the one who knew how to promote themselves well. For example, back in the days of the great artists, you could promote yourself through influential agents, right? So if you found a great agent, if you found the top gallery, that's it. You, or rather your work, would most likely sell really well. Now, we don't need agents anymore. We have social media for that. We have various platforms where we can present ourselves directly. But just posting your work on social media and sitting around waiting for millions to roll in is not a very effective strategy, because now you are your own agent, which means you have to run, well, basically a PR campaign, if you can put it that way. So you need to understand what type of content gets promoted well on social media. Unfortunately, guys, yes, I would really love to say that we are creative people, that we don't need all these worldly things, that we should bring light and beauty into this world and so on. But unfortunately, the commercial world doesn't work that way. So you really do need to figure things out. You really do need to sit down and learn how to set up an ad account on VKontakte, for example. That's all we have left now, right? so that someone can actually see your work. The same goes for Pinterest, for Behance as well, right? Don't forget that yes, you can simply upload your work to Behance, but you can also support your Behance portfolio through your social networks by interacting with other creators. Go around, like their work so that they come, check out your projects, give you likes and leave comments. Yes, this kind of mutual exchange of attention, so to speak, works really well. Try out some other strategies and so on. So just letting everything run its course, sitting around and feeling down, as I've already said, is not the most effective strategy. If you're really too lazy to deal with all this, if you absolutely refuse to become your own agent, because I just can't handle it, then in fact, there are art agencies out there. They still exist, and there are a lot of them in the international market because, as a rule, foreign publishing houses don't work directly one-on-one with the author. They only work through agencies. So that system is thriving there. Here, it's a much rarer thing, but it does exist as well. So my friends, you can always put together a beautiful portfolio and send it out, for example, to the international market. You can always search among Russian art agencies and find the one that suits you. If you want to create stock illustrations but find it difficult, or you don't want to deal with the current complexities of doing this from Russia and so on, you can always join a stock studio. They exist, they are still operating, many have relocated and so on and so forth. But it's still possible. And you can simply draw and enjoy the process. In fact, that's exactly how I worked for a stock studio. I just drew what the art director sent me. We had excellent mutual understanding. He took my wishes into account and I considered his requests. We knew what to expect from each other, and basically I just created for my own pleasure. I think it was a wonderful partnership overall. So everything is in your hands. That's all I can say. Everything is in your hands. You can choose different options that suit your particular situation best. Also, I often notice this sense of underestimating oneself, the author themselves. Maybe I can attribute this to upbringing, which often comes with this feeling, how should I put it, of inadequacy, this sense of being an imposter, and so on. Because of this, people often want to set a lower price. Because of this, you don't want to stand out unnecessarily, participate in contests, and so on. And often this whole wait-and-see attitude is about thinking that someone cool and awesome will come along, discover me, and start paying me loads and loads of money. But guys, unfortunately, a creative profession these days is, well, about 60%. Okay, I won't scare you, let's say 50%. There you go. It's all about self-promotion. Unfortunately, maybe you don't like this kind of system. As I already said, there are other options. You can always go work in a regular job, for example, but unfortunately, most likely the salary will be lower. I'm talking about the Russian market here. I went on Headhunter and checked how much illustrators and designers are paid in offices. It made me want to cry, especially when I saw a salary of 20,000 rubles. I honestly didn't understand who they were trying to hire. And at the same time, there's such a long list of requirements, excuse me. They want Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, After Effects, and more. So basically you have to do everything. Well, you get what I mean. But that's just unreasonable. Really extremely unreasonable. I can say that you can earn more as a freelancer. But it's a different story when we're aiming for the international market. There, of course, it's a completely different story. There, creative professions are treated very differently and projects are approached in a completely different way as well. So once again, you need to treat this profession as a full-fledged career, as a real production process, which means you need to know how to present yourself properly, to sell yourself, and so on. Sometimes it happens that your hands are shaking because you wrote as if you can do much more than you actually can. So pushing yourself, you send out that portfolio thinking, well, no one will pick me, everything will go wrong. But most likely you will get chosen. That is, overall, looking at the market, looking at the works people publish and so on, I see that in reality, there isn't some kind of excessively high standard there. In fact, what my students draw, even in basic courses, is quite enough to go out and start earning money. Probably the most important thing when we talk about a creative profession is, of course, to engage critical thinking and to understand what the market needs. Because if you work as a commercial illustrator, first and foremost, you need to focus on that average drawing, on the average audience that this drawing, this illustration should appeal to. That is, you need to keep your finger on the pulse, watch the trends, see what is current, what colors are being used, what is being published, and so on, what topics are being addressed. So, in order to be a good specialist, it's not necessary to draw like a god. You just need to be in the loop. You just need to understand the tasks, understand the market demand, and be able to meet that demand. For example, if now many clients are asking to send references generated by AI, that makes me laugh because it's actually faster for me to draw than to generate something with AI. So maybe you just need to learn how to use AI and, well, meet that demand. But again, I'll repeat myself. AI is just a tool. And what I see being published as a finished illustration, just a raw image straight from artificial intelligence, first of all, it always stands out and looks terrible. And it already looks very cheap. So people who agree to have their product presented with such cheap visuals are simply devaluing their own work. That's 100% true. And maybe not everyone realizes this yet, but give it, I don't know, another year. As I already mentioned, trends are already changing now, and I'm sure that many people will come to appreciate the value of human work. So the trends will shift. At least I hope so. I really hope that finally the issue of borrowing specific author styles will be addressed, because it's honestly disgusting and terribly unfair. So my friends, perhaps I have spoken a little confusedly here. Perhaps you don't agree with some of the points I've made. Be sure to come to the comments. Let's discuss. What do you think about AI? What do you think about myths? Perhaps there are some myths that you have encountered that I have not voiced. I would be very interested to read your thoughts. Well, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Wishing you all the best, creative inspiration, and goodbye for now.